Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cosmic Egg. And as you know, this show is not timid about bringing on controversial issues. This week we have rather interesting information to share with you and a very, very controversial figure. His name is Vladimir Terziski, and he is here joining us to impart on us an awful lot of information. So Vladimir, welcome, and I'm very glad that you managed to make it.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Now, Vladimir, I've looked at your credits and I'm terribly impressed. In fact, looking at what you've done in terms of education, I'm really surprised. Here you have a Bachelor of Science in Physics, you have a Master of Science in Electronics, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. You have brought on to me an awful lot of information about about Nazi Germany and the technology that they had in the 40s. Now, I am absolutely astounded by the information that you have to share with us. You have brought on pictures. Could you please tell us about these pictures and what they actually are telling us?
Well, in one sentence, while researching UFOs in general and the terrestrial component of the alien presence in particular, namely secret terrestrial programs that have been dealing with anti-gravity and secret space programs for the last almost 100 years, I realized that a lot of these secret projects are covered up behind the alien smokescreen, and later on laundered to the general public as an alien technology gift to us. And in order to pull the carpet from under the feet of the government, or let's call it the party line American ufology, I've been doing research on Nazi UFOs, on the 50 or more basically different models of crap that the Germans built before and during the Second World War, powered by every engine that was in production in Germany at that time, by piston engines, Wankel engines, turbojet engines, ramjet, pulse jets, rocket engines, and the final and most advanced models were powered by electromagnetogravitic drives. These are the most, basically no moving part drives. But in order to convince someone that this massive research and development conspiracy, let's call it, and this secret space program run by the Germans has been on for all these years. Actually, the persistent rumors are that the Germans landed on the moon and Mars before the war ended. And later they were followed by many other secret programs, but we will talk about that probably in a future show. The Russians and the Americans landed on the moon and Mars in the late 40s and early 50s respectively. An Italian team landed on Mars in 56. Many superpowers have been actively pursuing secret space programs based on anti-gravity propulsion. But in order to convince someone of the existence of this massive research and development conspiracy, one first has to be convinced of the existence of political and economic conspiracies in this world. Here I have few little books that are probably the best introduction into the field of economic conspiracies. None there called Conspiracy and the Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin. One of the best books on the New World Order conspiracies and secret government projects is Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse. There isn't much time for further political conspiratorial introduction, but behind the political conspiracies are the scientific conspiracies, or the secret sciences of the hermetic societies and brotherhoods that for thousands of years have been practicing endeavors that are considered science fiction by the general public. This is a book about flying devices built in India 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. In my research, bibliographic research, I have a vast collection of several hundred books on this topic, and these are some of the most interesting ones relating particularly to German secret weapons.
Okay, so in this book that you just brought on, you talk about Germany already. Does this actually mention that Germany, before the Second World War, being involved in very, very advanced technology?
Yes, actually these books mention a lot of extremely bizarre, almost science fiction military technologies. And the first book that mentions particularly the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany is the book Intercept UFO, or Intercept But Don't Shoot, by Renato Vesco.
Now, Renato Vesco, was he part of the Mussolini government?
Renato Vesco was actually a very leading figure in the Italian research and development effort. He was the research and development boss of the Italian Air Force. He may not have been a Werner von Braun, but he definitely was an extremely brilliant scientist and engineer. And besides that, Italians and Japanese were regularly briefed on all secret German developments during the war. So after the war, when he wrote the book, he knew exactly what he was writing about. Actually, he wrote and discussed in great detail the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany. This is the turbojet-powered flying saucer built by Schriever, diameter of about 30 feet. And the joint project, this was the first operational interceptor fighter saucer that was built by Belonzo, Miete, and Schriever. A very interesting fictional history of the German flying saucer effort are these two books by Harbinson, Inception and Genesis, written as documental fiction, but in my opinion they just show the basically the very first level of this tremendous research pyramid that happened in Germany. I have some photographs that were extremely rare to find. Many of these were pulled out of German libraries by our research associates and friends. Most of them are impossible to find in the United States. The third model that we talked about is a very interesting photograph done in 1952 over Mount Rainier in Washington State. And in my opinion, this is a flying Kugelblitz, or ball lightning, automatic anti-aircraft weapons platform that was captured by the Americans and test flown secretly from bases in the western United States and northwestern Canada. Later on, through German sources, we have discovered not only turbojet-powered craft, but these are rocket-powered craft with rocket engines of the V2 type. And the subsequent model of Miete, these two craft had an exoatmospheric capability, and they could easily go in orbit around the Earth. This is a very interesting drawing of a saucer-type dreadnought, a 60-yard diameter, this is about 200 feet diameter, interplanetary craft that has huge sleeping compartments. It is basically 10 stories tall. Drawings were published in Germany by a little secret society there.
What would have been the purpose of that Schriever flying disc here?
It had definitely an interplanetary objective, because a flying saucer that can circle the Earth in 1.5 hours does not need sleeping compartments. You don't have to sleep between your during your flight. Basically, the longest distance you can travel around the planet is 1-2 hours at the most.
Right.
So obviously sleeping compartments on such a massive scale would be needed only for a craft that would land on the moon, that would stay there for a long time and come back.
So you're actually saying that the Germans pre-World War II were refining the technology in order to actually travel to a different planet?
Exactly. These two models are capable of going in orbit around the Earth and probably going in an extended elliptical orbit toward the moon. This huge craft is capable of getting into orbit around the moon and landing on the planet. And These were actually the most primitive of the models that the Germans built. 2 months ago, I received, through some private channels, a secret documentary film made by the German secret society, the Thule-Gesellschaft, something like an equivalent of the Illuminati society here. The title of this documentary, 2-hour documentary film, is UFOs, the Third Reich Strikes Back. This is the emblem of this secret society. They were basically the ideologues of the Third Reich. Talking too much about Germany, I would not like the discussion to be considered as an apology of the German success. What the Germans did to millions of hapless victims in World War II, I mean, they earned enough karma from themselves to last them for this and many subsequent lifetimes to come, for these of us that believe in karma. But once these things invented, they were shared later by the superpowers. They cannot be disinvented, to use Daniel Bell's interesting
One thought
expression.
keeps coming back to me, and that is almost world supremacy. I'm looking at this and I'm going, what's the incentive? What's the reasoning behind trying to refine such technology?
Well, it gives man an ability to go to the moon, to explore the planets of the solar system, to go beyond the solar system. Some of these larger crafts were definitely able to go beyond the solar system, as we shall see very soon. The first row of photographs, actually this is a very small part, this is maybe a third of all the documentary photographs shown in the German documentary video. These are interceptor fighter craft of the Vril series that have never been written about in any other source in the world literature so far. They were about 30 feet in diameter and extremely maneuverable. Their speed was almost 3 times the speed of sound. For them, Allied bombers and fighters were basically sitting ducks. Renato Vesco, in his book, depicts about 3 dozen attacks of flying saucers on Allied bomber formations with devastating consequences, and these all were attacks of the previous and more primitive craft. These craft were developed in the very last years of the war, 44, 45. This subsequent line here are the 25-meter diameter, which is about 75-meter diameter, 30 feet tall tank killers. The craft of the Honeybull type. We have never seen before UFOs with tank turrets attached underneath.
Oh yeah.
We see different models of tank turrets. Actually, these are standard issue turrets for the German Panther tank and the Panzervier tank. Later models developed in the 60s from the German colony on the South Pole, which is another very controversial issue. Admiral Byrd led an expedition to the South Pole in '47, trying to wipe out the Germans, but he was beaten very badly. In just 2.5 weeks he had to leave the continent because the Germans had perfected all these craft. On the bottom row we have the most interesting examples here. This is an original drawing of a cigar-shaped mothership of 330 feet length that was carrying inside itself one of the tank killer craft and 3 of the interceptor fighter saucers.
So how big was this cigar-shaped
It
craft?
was about 90 to 100 feet in diameter and 330, 350 feet length. This is a football field size craft. The most interesting, and this could be photographs of German crafts in flight well after the end of the World War, probably flown from their base on the South Pole.
In what year was that, approximately?
These photographs were taken 42, these are and 43, these are 44 and 45. These were taken after the war. The drawings date from 1943. The biggest craft that the Germans built was the 74-meter diameter. This is about 220 feet diameter flying saucer of the Honeybull 3 type. This is a naval warfare craft with, we can see here in these turrets, triple guns of a naval caliber, 3 turrets on the underbelly and a 4th turret on the top. This was a craft made for huge naval warfare. According to this film, the only craft was taken and flown from the Earth to Mars by a huge crew of basically volunteers and self-sacrificial crew of Germans and Japanese. And it landed on January 15, 1946. After 8 months of flight, they departed April 45, a month before the war ended in Germany. And they crash landed on Mars. The gravity field there is too weak, so the craft couldn't make it real nice in the landing. The most interesting things about this craft are that these are free energy devices. These are basically flying converters of gravitational energy that convert the energy of the geomagnetic field of Earth into the electromagnetic energy of flight. So these craft never had to tank. They never had to replenish their reservoirs. They had actually tapped into the inexhaustible reservoir of free gravitational energy of the planet. This is something even more taboo as a topic than the fact that the Germans developed all these 50 different models of craft. Because if one is able to go basically for free to the moon and Mars without using a single gram of fuel, free riding on the gravitational currents of our solar system, then a lot of our present-day economy about, well, we all have to pay for the fuel when we tank our cars, becomes obsolete.
So let's discuss this in much more depth. In your estimation, where is all this technology stored?
Well, Germans were not the first one to develop this technology. John Keely presented his anti-gravity flying bathtub, as if we may call it like this, a funny looking contraption. He sat on it, rose noiselessly, accelerated to a very fast speed and came back and landed in front of the stunned eyes of the War Ministry here in the United States in the 1860s. They said, well, we can't find any possible use of this device.
Where was Nazi Germany? I mean, when did Nazi Germany actually come into play?
There are persistent rumors that the Germans were contacted by one extraterrestrial race, as have been all governments of all superpowers all throughout the terrestrial history. But that particular race was the cause of this tremendous explosion, this cornucopia of German killing machines and advanced weapons technologies that had absolutely no precursor whatsoever in previous terrestrial developments. So basically from the 20s and 30s, Germany was actively pursuing research in rocket propulsion, in anti-gravity propulsion, in free energy devices that were later combined with their flying saucers to make these formidable weapons. Later on, this technology was used by the secret powers, by Russians, by the superpowers, namely the Russians, the British, the Americans, the French. Even the rumors are that the Israelis and the Brazilians have their own anti-gravity craft in operation these days.
I have a question that's burning me. That question is, why didn't the Germans at the time when they were actually losing the war, why did they not actually throw all the technology that they had, such as this, and just as much as possible obliterate the enemy?
Oh, well, actually, we are getting here very deep into the political and banking conspiracies behind these wars. A war is not meant to obliterate the enemy. A war is meant to load the credit card of the government by forcing it to buy more armaments. If you obliterate the enemy, there wouldn't be any future enemy for the future war that is coming. Okay. So basically, all these wars have been orchestrated and choreographed by the same world banking elite that has been funding both sides in a conflict.
But in what way would that benefit Nazi Germany?
Well, actually, from the mid-30s, the Germans were actively involved in their South Polar research. From the late 30s, they started building their underground bases on the South Pole, and by 45, they have moved, according to some rumors, from a few 100,000 to up to 1 million of slave labor and Nazi scientists and SS officers down there in this huge underground colony that later on engaged in space exploration and genetic research. According to persistent rumors, basically all the genetic research going on in the underground labs these days in the United States has been started in Nazi Germany. I know a very good movie producer who was working on one UFO documentary, and he saw in a military base here in the United States a documentary film, 30-minute film about genetic research on humans, crossbreedings between humans and animals in Nazi Germany 50 years ago in the concentration camps. So the South Polar colony had primarily its goals in space exploration and genetic research. So basically the Germans were saving all these devices for the defense of the South Polar colony, which Admiral Byrd learned unexpectedly that they had made an impenetrable fortress there.
So why did we not find out about what happened to Admiral Byrd?
Well, there's an interesting interview in an Argentinian paper. He probably gave that on his way back from the South Pole before the security lid was clamped on him, where he said the next World War will be fought with an extremely powerful adversary that has the ability to fly from pole to pole. He was obviously talking about the German craft that obliterated his aviation. All his planes were shot down in less than 3 weeks. He came down with 3 carrier fleets with 3 formations of carriers and support craft and 4,000 troops, and was beaten in less than 3 weeks and hastily retreated from
After the Second World War, Nazi Germany, obviously after its defeat, was there a tacit agreement that they could keep that technology and refine it further? I'm surprised that...
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the Rothschilds and all the other European bankers have been financing for 300 years both sides in every conflict. And this is the best way for them to have the government load their credit cards, and so then to live off these enormous interest on these loans. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany was financed by basically the Wall Street and the American banking community and the European banking community, as was the Russian Bolshevik Revolution.
Are you saying that German bankers, namely some of the big families, were behind the revolution in Russia?
Well, the Russian Revolution was financed by Wall Street, by the Vatican, and by South African gold. It was financed, it was planned, financed, paid for, carried, and later on Wall Street helped Russia in the first 20 years of the most difficult 20s, basically in the 20s and 30s, by propping up the Russian economy. So what happened to the German South Polar colony? I think that Admiral Byrd probably concluded the first tacit agreement or condominium agreement between the Americans and the Germans, namely that let's not interfere into each other's affairs. Maybe even we would do some trading. We would be trading with crude materials, raw materials, bolts, nuts, metal profiles, raw materials, and you would be giving us some of your astonishing technology. This is according to Renato Vesco in his book Intercept But Don't Shoot, and according to the book of Genesis.
These are fictionalized.
The second, yes, but this is a documentary, highly engineering, highly specialized report on the German anti-gravity research and development. I have a lot of information about secret collusion between the United States and Russia, all behind the smoke screen of the Cold War.
But Germany, what's Germany's involvement in the Cold War?
Official West Germany, very little. Basically, they were the strongest member of NATO. But the secret German colony on the South Pole was basically working hand in hand with the secret Soviet American space program. It is rumored that when the Russians and Americans landed on a joint flight to the moon with a probably American-made saucer in the late 40s, not only that they discovered the German swastika flags already planted in the most famous craters on the moon, but they spent a few days as guests to the German ex-Nazi moon base.
Yeah. So you have so much information, it's staggering. In fact, I'm absolutely overwhelmed by all the information that you've managed to share with us in such short time. And I would like to be able to invite you for further shows where we can go much deeper into how all this Nazi German involvement came about and where it's really taking us to ultimately.
Actually, I have several videos that I've been selling for the last 1 year. Any one of the viewers that are interested in obtaining more detailed information and lengthy bibliographies, I have a bibliography that runs into the hundreds of volumes.
We will have
detailed bibliography. From that phone number at the end of the show, they can order some of these videos. I'll be making some new ones. Basically, it's a very interesting collection of documentary films and materials.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really glad that you actually came today to share all this information with us, and I hope that we will go much deeper next time into all of this
Next
stuff.
time I would like to talk about the secret Russian-American space programs, the landing on the moon in the late 40s, the landing on Mars in the early 50s. I even think that I have a documentary footage of the first joint landing on Mars. The film says that it was made in '62. I have a suspicion that it was way back in '52. A saucer landing by the two superpowers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on the Cosmic Egg. And please write in, send us your comments, give us your suggestions, and thank you again for joining us on this show. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Robert Montgomery speaking. From the nation's capital has come a new epic of American courage and sacrifice, America's greatest adventure in polar exploration. This is a tale of men and of their willingness to endure hardship and risk life above and beyond the call of duty in the service of country and humanity. For brevity, the sequence of events has occasionally been rearranged. The President's cabinet approved the expedition. As Secretary of the Navy, James V. Forrestal explains the reasons for the enterprise.
There is only one untouched reservoir of raw materials left in the world, and that's in the region known as Antarctica, an area larger than the combined area of the United States and Europe. The American government is sending a naval expedition to that region. The purpose is to train our Navy in polar operations so that it may better perform its function of preserving the peace upon the seven seas of the world. Beyond that, the American government is seeking to do its share in the discovery and the release to the world of the unknown treasures of Antarctica in the interests of all mankind.
Thumbs up to this gentleman. The Secretary has approved our plans, confirming you, Admiral Byrd, as the officer in charge of the expedition, and you, Admiral Cruzen, as the task force commander. And we get everything we need. That makes Operation High Jump the greatest polar expedition in history.
Admiral, time is going to be our greatest handicap. By the time we get through this very difficult ice pack, the summer will have ended and the fall will have set in.
Never before has anyone attempted to take a fleet of thin-skinned steel ships through 300 miles or more of crushing ice pack.
I have great faith in your skill, courage, and determination. Now, gentlemen.
Admiral Nimitz reviews the operations plan. The expedition will comprise 3 groups: a central land plane group to explore the interior from Little America, and 2 seaplane groups, the eastern to map that half of the continental shoreline, and the western to map the opposite coast of Antarctica. After the original orders have been issued, 3 months of planning are needed to organize the giant venture.
This is Robert Taylor speaking. At the world's greatest naval base, Norfolk, Virginia, ships of the Central and Eastern groups are loading. The flagship, Mount Olympus, equipped with powerful radio and radar, will serve as the leader's voice of command. Admirals Byrd and Cruzen come aboard to check staff preparations, food, fuel, and clothing for 4,000 men. Byrd greets staff officers who have fitted out the expedition. Not a few vessels, but a fleet. Officers and men, not hundreds, but thousands, and pilots by the score. The Chief of Staff, Captain Quackenbush, calls up the fleet's youngest recruits to meet the admirals, who name them Running Jump and High Jump. The pups are unimpressed by rank.
Running Jump and High Jump are first arrivals from the Chinook kennels at Wanalancet, New Hampshire, where sailors are learning the art of navigating dog sleds. Everything happens to sailors. But soon they come to understand and to love the Huskies. They watch their dogs carefully to see that they have enough to drink and enough to eat, and always at the right time. Dog Watch Bluejackets practice the patient care that will keep the dogs in prime form. Not only food, daily attention to their eyes so that they may not suffer the dreaded Arctic snow blindness, and the inevitable vitamin pill that even dogs can't escape these days of ABCD health. The boys learn all the tricks. Tickling of the throat and a pat on the nose gets the pills down. Dog sleds are the small boats of the Antarctic. Each carries 600 pounds, with 10 dogs hauling. Each dog's harness is tailor-made, carefully fitted to avoid the chafing that has been fatal to many a sled dog at below 0 temperatures. The Husky's paws are equally important. There are canine snowshoes, precisely notched for the pulling claws. In cut-down auto chassis, the sailor drivers finish training. Huskies so often have meant life itself to Admiral Byrd that he calls them his Antarctic Life Insurance Company.
From Norfolk, Admiral Cruzen sails aboard the Mount Olympus. His crews are a cross-section of the country's manhood. Admiral Byrd will follow later in the carrier, Philippine Sea. The Coast Guard icebreaker, North Wind, powerful plow horse of the expedition, backs out. The seaplane tender, Pine Island, is first to stand out to sea. Steaming south via the Panama Canal, the fleet must cover 12,000 miles to reach Antarctica. At the 100th meridian west, the groups are to separate, and the central group proceed to a rendezvous point at Scott Island.
This is Van Heflin speaking. Sailing day at Santiago finds the Western Group helicopters practicing final pinpoint landings on the newly installed helicopter flight deck of the seaplane tender Currituck. They are to serve as eyes of the fleet when it buffets through the pack ice, and when need be, to go on rescue missions. For exploration, 3 Martin Mariners, called PBMs, with a flight range of 3,000 miles, are spotted aboard the Currituck. Ships of the Western Group will proceed 10,000 miles south to the Balleny Islands, 860 miles to the west of Little America.
Aboard the Mount Olympus, now heading south in the Pacific, Admiral Cruzen gives a traditional command, and up goes a strange flag. The Jolly Roger, signifying the crossing of the equator and authorizing the ancient shenanigans of the sea, whereby all landlubbers are painfully presented at King Neptune's court. The veteran shellbacks copperplate the polywogs' interiors with a mixture of cylinder oil and chewing tobacco. Next, the polywogs must kiss the bosun's belly, the only kiss they'll have for many a long month. They wind up with a dunking and a final whacking to warm them up, officers and men alike. Wearing the whiskers of Neptunus caninus, Ricky, the veteran husky, presides as the pups become doggy shellbacks. The oncoming shadow of the Antarctic intensifies preparations. Bamboo is split for trail marker sticks. These, topped with flags, will form lifelines to guard the men against losing the trail in blinding blizzards. Small details, but vitally important in the wilderness of ice. The dogs are inoculated against infection. Now the serious business of the sea takes over. Danger menaces the fleet oiler, Cacapon. She must fuel the fleet now to lighten her cargo of 4 million gallons of oil. If storms strike her, plates may warp, rivets shear, and her back may be broken. And ahead are the dreaded roaring 40s. Deck parties run with hauling lines, bringing over the Cacapon's captain for a conference. The ships are still on course, forging ahead, but the Cacapon's salty skipper smells storm coming. Few ships travel this lonely ocean, so there are no weather reports. We've got to finish this job fast, he roars, or we'll be caught on a stiff blow. And blow she does. And clearing skies, but still the gale blows hard. Aboard the seaplane tenders, rolling decks imperil the big seaplanes. Deeper. A sudden lurch. The Navy cameraman taking these pictures is thrown, his leg broken. He swings his camera, catches the nose of one plane smashed in, swings aft, spots another plane overboard, sinking in the wake. Lost. There's no loss of life, but below, in sick bay, the surgeons are busy with the injured. Today, with Navy's modern science, an injured seaman is soon up and about.
We go back now to Norfolk and sailing day for Admiral Byrd. 6 DC-3s, called R4Ds by the Navy, make the longest taxi run in Navy Yard history, each with crewmen riding the tips of their 98-foot wings. Poles and buildings have been removed to clear their way to the 30,000-ton carrier, Philippine Sea. Admiral Byrd will sail the carrier close to the edge of the pack ice, then fly his 6 30,000-pound land planes from her deck, 800 miles across the pack to Little America. A daring and dangerous plan. But precedent was made in 1942 by Jimmy Doolittle in his much smaller B-25s, Tokyo bound from the carrier Hornet.
As the Philippine Sea sails on her 10,000-mile voyage, the advance group under Cruzen has voyaged far south. They sight their first icebergs just above the Antarctic Circle. Careful bearings are taken, for the hulls of these ships are no thicker than was the steel skin of the Titanic. The treacherous ice is the enemy now as then, but danger is the sailor's business. His delight is in preserving home traditions, the Christmas tree and Christmas dinner.
Merry Christmas, sailor. Merry Christmas.
We'll be right back with TNT Overnight. 50 years of classic films all night long. For love, he'll throw down his...
Engines throb, taking the central group deeper into icebound seas. Now, by the far-seeing eye of radar, the bridge learns of land ahead, and flag communications passes the word to the fleet. Scott Island, dead ahead. All ships rendezvous. 600 critical miles of their 12,000-mile voyage still to go. The ice pack ahead has been the executioner of many gallant ships. Cruzen summons captains and executive officers for a staff conference. While the staff confers, a small landing boat sets off for Scott Island, named in honor of the heroic British explorer, Captain Robert Falcon Scott, who lost his life a generation ago trying to fight his way back from the South Pole. In such surging seas, landing is impossible. The boat heads back for Mount Olympus with serious news. Cruzen must abandon his plan for a weather station here on this rugged submarine mountain. Time presses hard. With his operation officers, Cruzen transfers his flag from Mount Olympus to the Coast Guard icebreaker, North Wind, for she must take the lead, cut the channels. Admiral Cruzen's battle now begins. Through 600 miles of peril, the Admiral must bring his ships to the open Ross Sea, and thus to the Bay of Whales and Little America. Cruzen signals, "Follow me," and sets a careful course past icebergs. There she blows, sings the lookout. There she breaches, close aboard. These huge whales measure up to 80 feet long, and each yields oil worth more than $2,000. The radar watch informs the bridge they have picked up a big ship, a Norwegian whaler, with her killer craft in close company. The Norsemen report the heaviest ice pack in 40 years. This year, they tell the Americans they're staying to the north of the ice. The Norwegian captain urges, exercise extreme caution. The American fleet proceeds. Here is the most treacherous navigation in all the 7 seas, with every floe, every berg a potential killer of ships. 7/8 of a berg lies underwater. Its jutting ice foot can slice into a ship like a can opener into a can. Ahead, the sky shows white streaks, the telltale ice blink, the warning reflection in the sky of the great pack. The ships meet their first tabular, the tabletop berg found only in the Antarctic. These tabulars are huge chips from the great ice barrier. They measure as long as 40 miles and are counted not in acres, but in square miles. The ships must follow a twisting, turning sea alley, cleared by the icebreaker. The submarine, Senate, brings up the rear. New-formed ice, known from its shape as lily pad ice, offers no trouble. It is the bergy bits and the bergs themselves that form the hazard for the submarine. A little Adderley penguin comes aboard as pilot. It rides the deck for 2 solid days. Navy cameramen find new subjects. A group of emperor penguins feeding in the lead. Lookouts spot a flock of snow petrels, those hardiest of birds. Admiral Cruzen orders reconnaissance by helicopter and himself boards the plane as observer. For the first time, the helicopter serves as the eyes of the fleet to scout out a way through the ice. Somewhere to the south, Cruzen hopes to locate better going, perhaps a lead heading toward Little America. Beyond the brash ice, at first he can spot only isolated lakes. At last he sees his lead. Reconnaissance by helicopter has paid off. And just in time, for the helicopter's gas is running low. The long practice hours of pinpoint landing have not been wasted. The Admiral is safely back aboard. Cruzen changes course to head the fleet toward his lead. No open roadstead here, no channel markers. The turn is difficult for the big ships. Now to the men of the fleet comes one of nature's weirdest pictures, the Antarctic twilight. Eerie greens and pastel blues. Men who look grow silent, but long remember. Nor will they forget the dawns and the seals. Through the pack was to have taken 3 or 4 days, but a week has passed, and the task force has made only 100 of the 600 miles across the pack. An emergency radio to the north wind summons instant help. The submarine, Senate, is caught. The jaws of 2 ponderous pressure flows have closed in, locking her in a white vice. The submarine is in acute danger of being sunk. Realize now that the Senate may never get through. Cruzen signals, resume course.
Meanwhile, the eastern group has steamed to Peter the First Island, 1,250 miles northeast of the main base to be established at Little America. The eastern group's seaplane tender, Pine Island, sends a helicopter to scout the rugged coast. Hope is fulfilled when she relocates Scott's 37-year-old camp. This was the base for the ill-fated Britain's expeditions at the turn of the century. While the helicopter waits, the Americans look over the hut, finding only an abandoned sled. But back at the Pine Island, the helicopter meets trouble. Her rotors, heavy with ice, fail. She crashes only a few feet from the safety of the landing deck. Within seconds, the Pine Island's crash boat reaches the sinking helicopter. The rescue crewmen, drilled for just such an emergency, yank Captain Dufek and his pilot safely aboard.
Back at the central group, danger increases for the submarine. Crushing ice is now riding up over her decks. She is solidly frozen in. The Senate's situation is desperate. Clearly, she cannot undergo further risks. There are 85 men aboard. The ice locking her in is a solid pressure field spotted with bergs. She must be taken back. The north wind cannot get the fleet through if constantly halted to rescue the submarine. Guard icebreaker North Wind, with Admiral Cruzen in operational command, leaves the ships to await her return from the 400-mile round trip, towing the battered submarine, the Senate, north to the safety of the open sea.
1,200 miles to the west, 10 men set out from the western wing of the expedition on a hunt. For one of the seaplane tender Currituck's missions is to bring back specimens for the Federal Fish and Wildlife Commission. The Marine marksmen storm the ice floes. These seals are armed with tiger-like jaws, easily capable of mangling a man's arm or leg. The men risk the slashing jaws of the master bull himself. He's no calf, he fights to kill. Once secured, he finds out for the first time in his life what it's like to be petted. That's not so bad. They total up their catch for the scientists back in Washington. 6 leopards and 1 rare Ross seal. The first Antarctic seal ever to fly through the air with the greatest of ease in a cargo net.
3 days later, disaster presses close to the ships of the Central Group, helpless without the icebreaker. Their 2,000 men are marooned in a frozen sea. Below the waterlines, damage control crews labor in icy water to shore up the inward bulging plates. The lives of all hands are at stake. The radio flashes an SOS to Cruzen 200 miles to the north. Quickly, he orders the submarine to go on by herself to Scott Island and there operate as a weather reporting station. And now begins a race against time well worthy of high place in the traditions of the United States Coast Guard. Receives black news from the flagship, Mount Olympus. Already 5 frames forward stove in, more weakening. Only the north wind can bring salvation to the 2,000 men of the stricken fleet. Dr. Seipel, Army ice veteran, volunteers to test the floes. If the ships must be abandoned, will the ice support the survivors? Cruzen awaits Dr. Seipel's verdict. Seipel reports the ice cannot be trusted. To go, the icebreaker is hemmed in by ice 20 feet above water, 50 feet below, in an area as great as 100 acres. Hopelessly gripped by the ice, the cargo ship Merrick is now in grave peril. Icebreaker, the fleet is now in sight over the pressure ridges. The desperate struggle of the north wind to reach them seems hopeless at times. The icebreaker counts her gain by yards now. Captain Thomas dares passages that normally he would avoid. It's the critical last round, a straight-out slugging match. North wind reaches the nearest ship, the Yancey. The icebreaker, Northwind, commands the only power operating in the whole frozen fleet. The Yancey and her 500 men are safe. Next, the Merrick, heavy in the water with a hole in her bow below the waterline. The Northwind reaches the flagship, Mount Olympus, cuts her free. The fleet has survived. 2,000 weary American sailors are safe. Beyond the great ice whirlpool that held them fast, they steamed through the southern edge of the pack, through to the open waters of the Ross Sea, and little America dead ahead.
Word of the deliverance of Admiral Cruzen's men reaches Admiral Byrd aboard the carrier Philippine Sea as she passes through the Panama Canal, Pacific bound. Officers watch sharply. The glove-tight fit of the 750-foot hull requires that the ship be kept exactly ruler edge true with the sides of the lock. The Philippine Sea navigates the canal in a day. As she heads south in the Pacific, Admiral Byrd devotes all his time to the flight ahead, perilous but of vital importance to naval aviation. Never before have such huge planes attempted carrier deck takeoffs. Never before have wheels and skis been combined in one landing gear. The wheels for deck takeoffs and the skis for landings on ice. The grave risk is that one may interfere with the other and bring disaster. Byrd makes the decision. The wheels will have only a 3-inch clearance between skis and deck. Upon this will depend the lives of 40 men, and he will lead the way.
Triumph at last for Admiral Cruzen. The entrance to the Bay of Whales, the famous 400-mile Ross Barrier. The Admiral can now relax. He, an American admiral, has brought a modern fleet for the first time into the innermost waters touching the great unknown continent of Antarctica. This is an historic moment. At long last, Admiral Byrd has realized his dream of many years of reaching little America with men and ships of the United States Navy. Reception committee. Hey, gang, hurry up. Get the big penguins in our bay. Big penguins, bigger than emperors. Big black mountains that move. They walk like us, but not quite the right way. Come on, gang. We gotta go see what gives. The big penguins and their big black mountains, the ships, are on 24-hour duty, with the first job to secure all mooring lines. Big timbers sunk deep in the ice serve as anchors. They're called dead men in sea parlance, perhaps because they're buried. Slip toggles are rigged for quick release in case ice forces an emergency getaway. Unloading. Reconnaissance planes first, next hauling equipment. The Marine Corps Weasels. Heavy-duty Caterpillars and trucks, 40 in all. Here are no port facilities, but the Navy shows its self-sufficiency as it did throughout the war in operating at sea without bases or with improvised bases. Here are no docks or roads, yet all freight aboard 3 heavily laden ships is hauled 2 miles over the ice up to Little America. Dogs next. A barking, tugging boatload of huskies. And the pups, growing fatter and bigger every day. All are happy with the welcome smell of snow in their nostrils. This is home. This is fun. But this is work, too, for time is short. The dogs must haul their share of the tonnage. Halt. Trouble ahead. Pressure ridges block the way inland to Little America. Even the largest Caterpillars are stalled. The call goes out for dynamite crews, Navy's trained demolition teams, seasoned on enemy beaches. They must blast the 50-foot ridges, clear the way to meet the expedition timetable. The ridges are deep. The blasting takes hours. Seabees and their bulldozers follow, smooth out the road for the big cats. In 2 hours, they bridge crevasses 100 feet deep. And so 10,000 tons of gear, brought down by the cargo ships, start moving up to Little America. Work goes steadily forward. Seabees, with all hands helping, use every one of the 24 hours of daylight in the South Pole summer. Caterpillars with snowshoe oversized treads accomplish in hours the work that in old days hundreds of dogs could do only in weeks. Airstrips, smoothed out with drags, take high priority. Byrd has flashed word from the Philippine Sea, now standing by off the pack ice, that he's ready to fly his R-4Ds in. It's up to the work parties to make up the time lost in the pack ice. Up to these men to work while gusty winds drive flesh-cutting gravel-like snow across the open, or to dig deep for storehouse foundations. Food dumps grow steadily. Here is the favorite hangout of the veteran Husky, Ricky. Born at Little America 12 years before, and still hungry. Each hour brings other buildings to completion. Knockdown Wanigans grow magically, and the Air Headquarters Quonset is ready. Snow blocks are dug out for windbreaker walls. These blocks are the adobe of Little America. Good idea, squawks the sidewalk superintendent of the base. Good idea. These big penguins do right well to bear in mind that when she blows down here, she's liable to blow your eyelashes off. The little Adderley shows no fear. What? Smoke? Silly idea.
We'll be right back with TNT Overnight, 50 years of classic film.
The ships are all but emptied. The Caterpillars and Go Devils live up to their wartime good name. Within 70 hours, the Seabees are hauling in the last 500 tons of essentials. Only a few more cases to be broken out. The local waterworks is the pride of the Seabees. 3 GI cans of snow produce 1 can of water, purest in the world. You keep your furnace going, which makes steam, which melts snow, which makes water. Simple. Simple once CB Engineering in Washington had figured it out before ever the first ship left port. And now, the ordered streets of a tent city that is Little America the Fourth come into being where 3 days before, the primeval snow lay unbroken. The church flag on the first Sunday signifies a pause for prayers. After the last Mass, and after the Protestant and Jewish services, the off-duty sailors have but one thought. Transportation has but one terminal, the mess hall, the best dinner of the week, as ancient Navy tradition always has decreed. Admirals and captains wait their turn in the chow line with the men. Inside, plates are loaded. Roast beef, rich gravy, high mounds of mashed potatoes, flaky pie. Life looks up again. A cigarette, good coffee. 5 miles east of Little America, a seal herd, 500 strong, has its feeding ground amongst pressure ridges and in deep crevasses. Ricky, as a pup, played the game of run, seal, run, and he hasn't forgotten. The seal wallops with his tail. Ricky's 12-year-old teeth are not so good on the slippery, wet hide of the 600-pound Waddell. Mr. Seal decides he's had enough. He scuttles down his escape hatch to the water below. Chow time. The only seals killed are for dog meat. Especially good because it insures against scurvy. The pups smell their dinner coming and let their handler plainly know they want it, right now. They're only a few months old and forever hungry. Yet soon they will be pulling more than their weight in the sledge traces. They like their meat red and will fight for it. The flagship flashes word by radio to the carrier Philippine Sea. Base ready, weather suitable.
On the carrier, 6 planes, triple-checked, are ready for their moment of destiny. Admiral Byrd has given the pilots a final briefing. Everything depends on split-second timing.
Pilots, man your plane.
No 3,000-foot runway here. Only a scant 300 feet. Jet propulsion is their reliance. Crewmen attach jet containers, 4 to a plane. These JATO bottles are packed with flaming power. In the critical 10 seconds at takeoff, they give the kick-up of 2 added engines. Byrd is airborne in exactly 100 feet. Admiral Byrd and his companion plane will try the 800-mile flight first. The others await his orders.
At Little America, cameramen and Admiral Cruzen wait anxiously. And there comes Byrd. Cruzen can relax now. The skis work perfectly. The carefully calculated drag of the wheels serves only to shoot up a plume of snow. Bird greets his son, Dickie Jr. first, here following Dad's footsteps. They watch plane number 2 come in safely. Bird tells Cruisin, good to be home again. But Cruisin has urgent news. There's a terrific storm brewing, only 10 hours more of safe flying. Bird radios the carrier, launch all planes as soon as possible.
By midnight, the Philippine Sea has the remaining 4 planes ready. They must risk a takeoff in darkness before the terror of the storm strikes. Daylight finds the planes over the pack ice. With frozen depth below and weather closing in, navigation becomes tricky. This close to the pole, the magnetic compass is no help.
At the base, men scan the gray skies, looking, and finding only the blackness of the approaching storm, now visible to the east. If the planes don't make it within an hour, but in they come, one by one, to land in the last remnants of clear light. Each landing is the first on the ice for each pilot. These men are the first ever to fly big planes into the Antarctic. Or on previous expeditions, the planes were freighted in, assembled, and only then were they flown. These Navy and Marine Corps flyers have been bred on stormy going. Their long experience and, above all, the Navy's relentless training in all details brings them in, but with little time to spare. The blizzard hits, 100 miles an hour, scouring across the sastrugi. In storms such as this, many brave explorers have died. Abatement of the storm, work parties head for the plains. The blizzard is 40 hours old. The wind has become bearable. The expedition flight schedules are days behind. They must get the heaters going, clean out the frost. The Antarctic offers no quick machine service as on standard Navy airfields. Fuel for the heaters must be hand-dragged, hand-pumped, hand-fed, with the temperature far below freezing. The chow wagon, the never-failing CB tractor, gives the work parties a lift back to the mess tent for hot coffee, food, and warmth. Only the Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Army cameramen who made this official record know the price they paid for these blizzard films. They covered the Pacific battles for posterity. This cold day, they froze their whiskers to make these first color films of an Antarctic blizzard. Little America digs out. The planes still stand on the line uninjured. Icicles and snow to be cleared off, but no plane blown away. Lashings held. Tent City intact proved out the technique of survival evolved by Byrd in a lifetime of exploration. Not one tent went down. No matter how great the pressure of work, the flag must be raised with a ceremony which is its due. Admiral Byrd declares Little America IV in full operating commission. The Admiral and the party ride Weasels 12 miles south to visit his earliest camp, marked by the radio towers. Little America I, now 40 feet under the snows of 17 years. And above it, Little America II, 25 feet under the snows fallen since 1935. Captain Boyd, United States Marine Corps, ties on a safety line. While Admiral Byrd and 3 veterans of his previous expeditions watch, Boyd inches his carcass down the old ventilating hatch. It stood 20 feet in the air when it was put up 12 years before. He pokes a stick up as a marker for the main hatch. Now all hands, the Admiral included, will have a chance to go look-see. Below, the old-timers find a lantern that lights at once, and all manner of other gear. For here in Antarctica, there is no decay, no rust, no dust, not even germs. Fruits, vegetables, meats, all good after 17 years. Small wonder Byrd preaches that one day, Antarctica may be the world's storehouse to keep the 7 years surplus for the 7 lean years. Byrd, bringing with him the old corn cob he'd forgotten in 1930, comes up last. He meets heavy going, but he makes it the hard way and seems to like it.
We'll be right back with TNT Overnight.
Can men survive in freezing water? Men from Mars, members of a special underwater demolition team, wear the new cold water rubber survival suit. In contrast to these skylarking youngsters eating ice cream in the ice, men in ordinary clothing are paralyzed in 6 minutes and die very quickly thereafter. Yet these sailors, wearing only underwear beneath their survival suits, stay in half an hour and come up chipper and warm. On the sunny afterdeck of the Mount Olympus, the expedition's prize penguin catch, the big emperors, are living the life of penguin Rileys. They grow 4 feet tall, weigh up to 80 pounds, and are the only creatures who live throughout the year on Antarctica. Eons ago, they flew. In time, their wings evolved into swimming fins. Their deep feathers are the warmest known. Their feet, thick leather-like pads. On these, they lay their single egg and tuck it up within the body feathers for warmth, to hatch it. In captivity, they must have their vitamins. Keeping them alive for the return voyage is quite a problem, for their bloodstreams have no germ resistance. Their necks are ball-bearing. Strangely enough, the smaller captive penguins prefer their fish fillets. They won't eat live fish out of a pail. The rockhopper penguins are the clowns of the Antarctic. 20 inches high, cocky yellow eyebrows, sassy, and forever hungry. As the men find out, they'll eat their weight in fish every 3 days.
The gathering of scientific data ranks high in expedition plans. Admiral Byrd says goodbye and good luck to an over-ice expedition which is to probe deep into the Rockefeller Mountains, 300 miles southeast. 2 LVTs hauling supply sledges strike out into the white darkness, their mileage checked by bicycle wheel counters astern. In the mountain rocks, they will seek minerals and ancient petrified vegetation. Hourly, they will record important aerological data. But exploration by plane has priority 1. 1.5 million square miles are to be explored and mapped, and the oncoming winter soon will end flying weather. The wheels come off, for both takeoffs and landings on the ice must be made by skis alone, delicately balanced to feather in the wind, yet strong to stand the shattering shock of landings. Organized exploration on a scale hitherto undreamed of calls for precision timing. Each plane is serviced on exact schedule with 1,200 gallons of high-test gas and with preheated oil tested to function at 80 below. A pressure tank, especially designed for operations in deep cold, pumps the oil into the planes. Daily flights begin. Each plane has a definite sector to explore, a definite timetable, a definite radio report schedule. While the weather holds, flights operate around the clock. For emergencies, the LVTs cache provisions and fuel at the limit of their range. To aviators forced down, to rescue planes sent out to bring them in, these cairns may offer the one hope and may mean ultimate survival.
1,200 miles to the east, the Eastern Group vessels and planes are exploring the mysterious Phantom Coast. Aboard the destroyer Bronson, the commander of the Eastern Group, Captain George Dufek, makes an exploration voyage. He sails close in to Mount Erebus, 14,000 feet above the sea. It is the only known active volcano near the South Pole. Captain Dufek, his mission accomplished, returns to rendezvous with the seaplane tender Pine Island. Personnel transfers to the destroyer must be made by breeches buoy because of rough seas. This officer would probably prefer a boat. The deep roll and the destroyer's outward flaring bow force the handling crew to wait for the exact moment to haul inboard, lest the man be dashed against the ship's side and killed. It is Captain Dufek's turn next. The line is set higher. The seas run stronger. The ships roll dangerously apart. The line slacks, then snaps taut and breaks. A 50-foot plunge downward. Dufek disappears.
Away, lifeboat!
Men jump to stations. Lower away. Hurry, hurry. 8 minutes in this icy water means death. Speed is the only hope. The boat sheers clear. Heads out fast to the rescue. Captain Dufek reappears. He has managed to inflate his life jacket. Minutes gone. Dufek grabs the lifeline. The seaman clutches him. By a margin of seconds, he is saved.
1,500 miles west of Little America, the Currituck and her western group are off the Shackleton ice shelf, circling the Sunset Coast. The western group commander, Captain Bond, gives pilots and plane crews a last briefing on Antarctic dangers and the technique of survival if forced down. The flight about to start is the longest and most important so far for the Western group. Before takeoff, survival gear is checked. Gear to keep 9 men alive for 100 days. Food, drugs, sleds, sleeping bags. On the water, the great PBM makes her takeoff run. Her jet assist bottles blast. She lifts quickly into the air and circles the Currituck once. Jet assist bottles, their work done, are dropped and make a salvo splash. The pilot, Commander David E. Bunger, wipes his frosted windshield, a constant source of trouble in polar flying. He is over the Shackleton ice shelf, named for the great English explorer who kept returning to the Antarctic until death, so often escaped, kept its rendezvous with him. The smooth shelf roughens. Dark rocks, called nunataks, appear above the ice. Then rugged mountain ranges as far as the eye can see. Bunger leans forward in amazement. His eyes have caught a sudden and unbelievable change in scenery. The universal white has turned to chocolate brown, dotted with blue. A cameraman goes into action. 300 square miles of land without snow. Land that might be in New Mexico or Arizona. Pictures alone will prove Bunger has discovered a warm oasis in the shadow of the pole. It is for such supreme moments as this that men brave the hardships of exploration. The astounding, undreamed of fact is that they are over a chain of warm water lakes whose shores, except for small patches, are free of ice and snow. Commander Bunger circles the largest lake in sight, 5 miles long. He comes in to make a landing. Water temperatures must be recorded. Samples taken. He finds the water fresh. The temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. On the shores are vast deposits of coal and of minerals of the utmost importance to civilization. Aside from their headline discovery, Bunger and his men have another good reason for hustling home to the Currituck. A long-awaited ceremony is in progress. The whole fleet awaits news of the all-Western beard derby. The Currituck skipper, Captain Clark, is judge. His salute of the day is right corner mustache, twist. The captain awards prizes to the winners, enlisted men and officers alike, the champions in the first Antarctic beard derby. To the most handsome, for the bushiest, to the officer who tried the hardest, to the neatest, to the most unique, to the red all-Currituckian, and to the one with the most sex appeal.
At Little America, a warning sounds. The fleet is in sudden danger. It is being frozen in. It may be locked within the Bay of Whales. Here is the treacherous foe. If caught, the ships will be wedged against the barrier, crushed. Here will be the graveyard of the fleet. to break up the crushing flows. Landing craft work frantically to loosen the ice around the ships so propellers may turn without shearing off. One by one, the ships are cleared. Get underway. Byrd remains behind with 197 volunteers and grave problems. His most important exploration flights will now lack the powerful directional radio of the Mount Olympus. To get his men out, he must hope the icebreaker can crash her way back in time. Otherwise, he and his men will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter. Marooned, Admiral Byrd and his staff plan the big flight to the South Pole and far beyond. This is the culmination, the last mass flight. 4 planes spanning out over a continent of unknown territory larger than Texas, California, and Arizona combined. Over freezing wastes without people, without life, without vegetation. Nature's most formidable challenge to man. The 4 planes are gassed up. All controls triple checked. Motors heated. For they face cold as extreme as 60 below. Unrelenting, murderous. Photographic units lead the parade of science to the planes. Each is a flying laboratory. The cameras are the trimetricons and the K-17s that spied out enemy secrets during the war. Now each plane carries 250 pounds of film to record some of nature's last great mysteries. The war's secret radar magnetic detectors are here too, bolted on like bombs. In war, their electronic impulses spotted minefields buried deep under the surface. Now they will read far below the ice, detect and identify minerals, coal, iron, precious ores. Byrd gets the words, "Ready, sir." He boards the leading plane, gives the command, "Take off." Crews hasten to rock the ships and thus free the skis frozen to the ice. Now all the work that has gone before, the planning, the task of preparing ships, of training men, the perilous voyage through the ice, now all of these investments of time and sometimes of suffering are come into focus. Takeoffs were non-stop flights over the desolate, danger-studded wastes of Antarctica. Flights of great distance, the equivalent of, back at home, winging non-stop from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. Aviation is all important in the Navy's Antarctic exploration, just as aviation is all important in a modern Navy that must be strong under and above the sea, as well as on it.
We'll be right back with
The shelf ice. Byrd leads his 4 planes in the long climb over pressure ridge areas, heading for the polar plateau, 10,000 feet up. Below are no landing fields, only deep crevasses, pressure ridges 100 feet high, instant destruction for a plane forced down. Byrd pioneered the first South Pole flight in 1929. He applies again the practice of constant vigilance, careful calculations that assured his earlier successes. Over this cruel country, Byrd flies today at 3 miles a minute. In earlier explorations, 3 miles in one day was frequently the utmost for Shackleton and Scott for Britain, Amundsen for Norway, and Byrd himself for America. The Beardmore Glacier, 200 miles long, 50 wide, 1,000 feet deep, who knows? Byrd checks position by the sun compass. The glacier signals the South Pole itself. Here, Byrd drops the flags of the United Nations, carefully boxed, a symbol of America's goodwill to all nations. Now beyond the pole, Byrd focuses his cameras and magnetic detectors on land new to him and to all mankind.
In eastern group waters, the seaplane tender Pine Island swings out a plane, listed on the fleet's roster as Mariner George 1. Crew members look out. No shadow of coming disaster troubles their young faces. Captain Caldwell, observer. Lieutenant J.G. Frenchy LeBlanc, pilot in command. Lieutenant J.G. Bill Kearns, co-pilot. Ensign Lopez, navigator. And a crew of 5 take off to map the treacherous Phantom coast.
Byrd's planes, deep into the unknown, are the eyes of civilization, recording, evaluating, mapping. Plateaus, mountain ranges with peaks 20,000 feet above sea level. The trimetricon lenses, clicking overlapping exposures every 3 seconds, photograph from horizon to horizon. Coal, a mountain of coal. Byrd later declares Antarctic mines, if once tapped, could supply the world's coal needs for centuries. These official motion pictures can give only a cross-section of the miles of photographic records accumulated on this expedition by the Navy. The exposed mapping film will take 5 years to assemble. Amplifying these are the radar magnetic detectors, accurately recording mineral discoveries of immense value for the future use of all mankind. England, Norway, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South American countries, and Soviet Russia are claiming Antarctic territory. The United States recognizes no claim, and so far has made no formal claims for itself. But international policies cannot concern the Admiral now. His duty is to keep his flying laboratories functioning, to fulfill his dream of a lifetime. The word "gas half gone, sir," comes from the engineer tabulating fuel tank readings. Byrd radios his pilots, return to base. By the third leg of their triangular course, the planes head back for Little America. Byrd's plane takes the widest swing fuel permits as the lenses of the Trimets continue recording new territory. This is the last big flight. Byrd is determined to record the maximum possible. One by one, the planes swing in over Tent City. Flight operations checks them in and safely down. Plane 2, plane 3, plane 4. But not plane 1. Byrd's plane is yet to be accounted for. Byrd is missing. Out over the ice, Byrd is in trouble. His starboard engine is cutting out, now stops. His one remaining engine is losing power. The altimeter needle starts dropping down. The plane is losing altitude.
All 4D1 to base, all 4D1 to base. Position Q5, engine out, losing altitude.
The base prepares for rescue operations. Handicapped by the partial power of one engine, the plane is in jeopardy. Down she drops. The needle drops from 3,000 feet downward, threatening peaks around her. A further drop might mean a crash. Only one hope: reduce the load, lighten her at once. Maybe that way, maybe if enough weight goes, maybe she will hold. Already the mountains are above. She is deep in the valley, deep in the shadow of disaster. The needle drops downward from 1,700 feet.
Jettison all gear.
Only the precious films and records are saved. The gamble is life or death. The altimeter levels off at around 900 feet. Slowly she starts to climb. She is gaining altitude. The pilot signals 4-0. 3 hours later at the base, the crippled plane comes into sight. Men peer closely, tense, hushed, as they see the starboard prop dead. The one-engine landing is tricky at best. With skis, on ice, hold your fingers crossed for the pilot. Safe, safe, good going. The greatest exploration flight of all history has ended in success. The flight beyond the South Pole. The flight beyond imagination.
But over the Pine Island with the Eastern Group is the shadow of tragedy. Captain Dufek flashes the word by radio.
To Eastern Task Group. From Task Group Commander, Mariner George 1 overdue. This group commence standard search and rescue operations immediately.
Grim men with grave news from Captain Dufek. No time now for jubilation over his own escape. No mood for rejoicing. Byrd knows better than any man the tragic import of the message. In the freezing danger of the Antarctic, seconds are hours. Minutes are days. Every resource of the expedition must be mobilized instantly.
All planes must take the air. All men stand alert for emergency duty. Over the ice pack, above the open sea, across the barrier. Mariner George 1 is down with men. No radio signals coming through. That means a crash. Search, search, search. Wherever the plane is, it must be found. For maddening, anxious days, fog shrouds the area where the accident most likely took place. Men are frantic. Yet daily, at their own request, at their urging, in fact, the crew of the Pine Island gathers for prayer service. On the 13th day, the weather breaks clear. Captain Dufek sends another PBM into the area heretofore shrouded in fog. At last, in clear visibility, the pilots and men scan water and pack ice along the Phantom coast. Wherever they are, the 9 men of the George I have been lost almost 2 weeks. Hope is thin. 5 hours out, Commander Howell, the pilot, spots smoke. A signal fire. Some are alive down there. How badly hurt? How many live? The George I smashed. The wreckage scattered, some of it burned. And a message on the wing. Lopez, Henderson, Williams, dead. No seaplane can land on the ice. Can the survivors reach open water? Howell must drop a message. We'll land Barrier's Edge 10 miles north. We'll drop flags to mark trail. If you can walk it, form circle. If not, form line. Howell knows the gravity of the decision Captain Caldwell must reach. But if the men can walk, a day may be saved. A precious day for the injured. Howell flashes the news. Captain Dufek gets the word and gives it to the Pine Island by loudspeaker.
Attention all hands. This is the task group commander speaking. Mariner George I has been sighted. Rescue operations are in progress.
Howell circles his PBM over the wreckage. He watches for his answer. The huddle of men breaks apart. They've reached a decision. It's a circle. They'll try the 10-mile trek to board the PBM at the water's edge. Howell's crew have the relief gear ready now for the men below. Cargo chutes float the heavy packages down. First aid boxes, rations, skis, blankets. For men hungry, cold, hurt, and losing hope, the chutes are as lovely as shining stars, symbols of life restored, of return to families who've been waiting and praying. Now to mark the trail. The PBM's crew have hundreds of flags, each weighted to land and stay upright. If fog should again close in on this desolate coast, there must be no second disaster, no wandering from the road to rescue. The survivors follow the trail markers. 5 able to walk, 1 on a sled, 10 miles to go. These men are marching out of the shadow of death into the sunshine of life. Aboard the rescue plane, ready to leave the barrier edge, the survivors, 6 thankful men, jerk out their story in bits and flashes. How Henderson, Lopez, and Williams died in the crash and explosion when they smashed up in milk bowl visibility. How they found scattered cans of food, a stove, and fuel to keep it going, and 1 tube of sulfur tablets, just enough to keep Frenchy LeBlanc, their gravely injured pilot, barely alive. Proudly they tell how Captain Caldwell consulted them all in dividing their little food, how he kept watch, inspired their faith, and how they prayed as men always do when there is no other hope but prayer. Bill Kearns, co-pilot, grins hello. First off is Frenchy LeBlanc. Corpsmen carry him tenderly in a Stoke stretcher. War and Robbins pulled him out of the blazing nose of the plane, but his back, hands, and face suffered third-degree burns, and in the Gethsemane of waiting for rescue, both legs were frozen to the knees. Amputation is inevitable, but he will live. The ship's company of the Pine Island greets their skipper, Captain Caldwell, observer on the flight. He says no ship ever looked so good to him as his own command, as again he sets foot on her decks. His executive officer greets him with sincere affection. Captain Dufek warmly welcomes the survivors. Co-pilot Kearns, his broken arm in a sling. McCarty, photographer. War, the radio operator. And smiling Shorty Robbins, the motor mech. The head is warm. A hot bath, clean sheets, and long hours of restoring sleep. And perhaps first, a moment to splice the main brace, by which good sailors mean a ration of medicinal spirits. Bourbon to you. Later in sick bay, all but Frenchy and Captain Caldwell enjoy their first full meal in 2 weeks. Kearns will go to Georgetown University to study for a career in diplomacy. McCarthy, who has a wife and 2 children in Sonoma, sunny California, beams happily. Robbins, who was the wheel horse in those desperate days, figures to keep on flying. He still loves it. And War knows that he will marry his school teacher's sweetheart back in Reading, Pennsylvania.
News of the rescue finds the icebreaker with Admiral Cruzen fighting her way through thickening ice to pick up Admiral Byrd and his men at Little America. Byrd is radioed for all speed.
At the base, the Admiral supervises Operation Secure. All essential records and scientific instruments are to be taken home. The planes must remain. They are stripped down with the hope that another American expedition in a future year may find them of use. Supply dumps are marked by poles. And now through the capes comes the old reliable workhorse, the icebreaker. Final loading is the order. All roads lead to the bay, the last trip down. The last long trek through the snow for the big Go Devil sledges, loaded with men and equipment. The excitement that always comes with sailing infects all hands, including the dogs. They sniff something important is in the wind. With normal quarters for 75, the icebreaker must jam aboard the additional 197 men of the base body until, after the voyage north, she can transfer personnel to the big ships awaiting her at Scott Island. Byrd is among the last aboard. He can now report to Admiral Nimitz, Operation High Jump completed. Our men have achieved accomplishments unparalleled in the history of discovery. Our central group has flown far beyond the South Pole, mapped 1/3 million square miles never before seen by man.
Our eastern group mapped 3,000 miles of phantom coast and charted 40,000 square miles of coastal ocean areas hitherto unknown.
Our western group, flying hundreds of air hours, mapped the 4,000-mile Sunset Coast, made the amazing discovery of warm land in Antarctica.
In all, the expedition explored more than 1.5 million square miles. Our scientists, by use of the radar magnetic detector, have pinpointed fabulous treasures and resources of great significance for all mankind. The men who did the job, Navy, Army, Air Corps, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and scientists, are going home. Tired men, they're going home to their mothers, sweethearts, wives, children. Home, strong in the knowledge that they have met the Antarctic battalions and conquered them. Well done.
So my question is, do you remain with an impression that he may have been talking about a hollow moon with major installations inside, or it was just a dugout, tunnel, and underground base, underground city type of a thing that the Earth government have done on the moon?
I kept thinking, you know, when he said under the surface, I couldn't imagine what in the world would be under the surface. Oh, he says there's plenty of room. That seems like there was plenty of room, but I don't remember him saying anything in particular that it was hollow. He says plenty of room. It's like he would tell me up to a point. And when he saw that my gears were in gear, he kind of, if I gave the impression that I almost understood and not fully understood, it was like he would go on. But as soon as I comprehended 100%, then it seems like he would stop. So sometimes it was like a little act between me and him. So I get more information by saying, oh, is this what you mean or that? And I knew full well what he meant, you know.
Can we check what is the time of the counter, what the counter is pointing right now? 1 hour and how many minutes? Yeah. 1:41 minutes and 21. Excellent. We have 20 more minutes, so we would finish at 25. Excellent. Now about his Martian trips, did he elaborate about being on the surface of Mars and inside Mars?
Yeah, he talked about it in the same breath with the moon.
Yeah.
And he says there were several of us that have gone up. I said, did you have to really be something special to be chosen? He says, we're all special. You know.
We were all special. Did he mention how they went there? Did they go there by a rocket, by a spaceship, by a flying saucer? I'm sorry, by some teleportation technology?
Well, at the time, the way he explained to me, it was incomprehensible. It didn't seem to be a mechanical way of going from point A to point B. He said it's incomprehensible.
So this is basically a teleportation explanation that a material object in point A is turned into beam of light and transported to point B where it is materialized.
I just thought of something, and first thing I said, and I was very liberated, I said, are there women up there too? He says, of course.
You were probably asking about Earth women.
Yes, Earth women, yeah.
Which means that there are families and there are children being born there, and it's a full-fledged colony. It's a survival civilization already established on the Moon and Mars.
Or at least women scientists or whatever they did, you know. I'm sure they didn't have women up there just to serve them coffee like they do in the offices here. Marina would love that.
Being inside Mars, I mean, let's finish off first with the surface of Mars. I remember this fictional film where government agents with the briefcases, with the wood and two-piece suits. They seldom wear three-piece suits. This is more of a British tradition than here. But anyway, this is my little observation as a foreigner. They would go to a teleportation installation and stand upright with a briefcase, and a beam would come and they would be teleported to different planets. I wouldn't be amazed. Actually, the more I think about these things, the more I realize that this could just be the case, that there is a secret or many government installations where they teleport important people back and forth between the planets, which is not that different anyway. Teleportation from an orbiting saucer to a planet is even more difficult, although the distance is shorter, because teleportation without a receiver station is more difficult. If you have a transmission and receiver station, basically a two-way stations on both ends of the beam, then it is a much simpler game to do. And that the government has established such stations. This is all done. This was done with Tesla technology, probably since the early 50s or 60s, and that they can teleport their important officials not only secretly from Washington to their embassies around the world, without exposing them to risk and problems with foreign intelligence services, but to different planets and so on. So, did he mention anything about a surface civilization living on Mars, an alien civilization living on Mars?
He seemed to feel, he used the analogy between, you know, the Moon and Mars within the same sentence structure, as if they were simultaneously together, the same bag of tricks at the same time.
Yeah, because with such planet-to-planet teleportation technology, whether you go to the Moon or to Pluto or Neptune, basically it's the same business. It's done in a second, in a split second probably. Now, to the underground of Mars, it's very interesting because Al Bielek and the revelations from him coming through the book, the Montauk Project, which we showed to our audiences in the previous interview we did with Al Bielek, the third underground interview with Al. He was talking of him and his brother Duncan going to Mars, inside Mars, into huge underground shelters, underground doomsday shelters that were built by previous Martian civilization, now extinct and no more existing. Shelters so massive, nobody could move the doors on the surface. Nobody could penetrate these on the surface. So what the government did was very simple. They just got the coordinates of the surface coordinates on Mars of the suspected underground structure. Probably they did a lot of scanning with their advanced scanning devices. And then having the coordinates exact, they used the time tunnel technology, which is a lot more advanced than the teleportation technology, to penetrate the underground spaces. And they would send first a camera, television camera, to get the picture, to make sure that they haven't hit a rock, and to make sure that whoever person travels through the time tunnel would not end up embedded in a rock or halfway inside a wall. And after that they just ended up on the other end of the tunnel, walking out of the tunnel onto these underground spaces. So I mean, this is another confirmation here that actually the government has been very actively involved in so many areas of research on the adjacent planets that is hard for us to imagine. Any other hints by your father as to similar developments by our government on other planets, not only the Earth and Mars, like our at least visits to Venus, to Jupiter, and to other planets, meetings with civilizations there, or anything about the Star Trek being truth rather than a fiction?
Star Trek, the movie Star Trek.
Yeah.
When I look at Star Trek, now I see that space station that's in there. Now that was almost the exact replica of what I saw in that underground place in 1956.
That was probably a space station that was already built and operational in '56, which means that I don't think that it is with saucer technology that the Americans captured by the Germans. It was done by saucer technology independently developed here with Tesla technology. I have a feeling that in the early 1900s already saucers were flying around the planet and possibly to the moon. The British would never relinquish, if they went to the moon with their hybrid gun, rocket, and anti-gravity technology, as I've been explaining in one of our videotapes available from us. Then they have been pursuing this with more advanced anti-gravity saucer technology in the early 1900s. Now, when your father materialized to you in your bedroom, what year was that, and how many years after his death was that?
It was a few months after his death, supposed death. It was a Memorial Day weekend in 1962. Now he died on Lincoln's birthday in 1962, so it was a few months afterwards. March, April, May, a couple months afterwards.
Did he look his age when he materialized to you, or did he look much younger?
He looked exactly like he did when I knew him. Exactly. He even smelled the same. He used Mole shaving cream. He looked exactly the same. Still the sparkle in his eye. I do know one thing. He was always testing me with a lot of things, and one of the things he used to always test me with was telepathy, mental telepathy. Even as a small child, he would draw a picture of a tree in the kitchen, and then I would see what he was doing, and then I would do a tree in the living room, this back and forth. So that kind of early training, I had this telepathic path between he and myself. No matter where he was, I knew what he was doing, and we had a very, very strong bond. So I feel no matter where he is, whatever I'm saying now is something that he wants me to do.
Very interesting, very fascinating. I've heard stories that the Germans that dug under the South Pole and built their underground bases before the Second World War ended, and that beat the hell out of Admiral Byrd's naval campaign against them in the winter of 46, the spring of 46, when actually in 2 weeks they downed most of his planes and he retreated in disgrace. This huge German colony there, they moved hundreds of thousands of people before the war ended. By now, I've heard rumors that this is
This was a very mysterious buzz that appeared only over this portion of the tape, inexplicably why. So now I am basically repeating the story of the German underground South Polar colony. The wildest stories are that there is a city called New Berlin that has 2 million inhabitants, the center of the German colony there. This is what has been developed after the hundreds of thousands of people were moved during the Second World War. The German elite basically lost the European war in order to win the South Polar War, in secretly preparing for 2 years for the awaited American attack, and when it came they beat Admiral Byrd in just 2 weeks with their way more superior technology that they had there. They've been engaged primarily in space exploration, flights in the solar system and beyond, and genetic experiments to create a new super race, a new master race, to create their dreamed supermensch. I've discovered witnesses that have seen German documentary films from the World War II concentration camps of horrific genetic experiments with hybridization between humans and animals, living, walking, breeding hybrids, half human, half animal. So basically for half a century after that the Germans continued in this direction, and in this large city that they have there underground, the city fittingly called New Berlin, they've been basically evolving the new super race that is quite more advanced and has very little in common with the race that lives on the other part of the planet. It's my intuitive feeling that the tall blonde aliens, the Nordic type aliens that have been observed in many little gray abduction scenarios, they could as well be Germans coming from their South Polar colony that are doing research together with our government in genetic experiments primarily on the American population in order to create a white Nordic type race. This is my deepest suspicion, and this is one of the biggest secrets of the intelligence community these days. So I don't know, this buzz that appeared on the tape could have been accidental, or it could have been just on the most sensitive place of the whole tape.
Homes, if they have books or just magazines. Simple observation, he said. Now, he was not a snob. He loved all people. He says the key to everything is reading. So he would take building blocks, little building blocks, and he put them. I was not allowed to sit on the floor, so I had a card table, and he showed me the first word was Gott, which is God.
G-O-T-T.
Gott, yeah. And of course I wrote everything in German. And before you knew it, he had me quoting Goethe, the Bible, Heinrich Heine, my favorite. My mother would help me with the poetry. I would read reams of poetry. I'm 2 years old. My mother would sit and embroider or sew. She says, read me from Heinrich Heine, or whatever you like, you know, your favorite poems. So they were very long, elaborate poems, and it was a lot of practice. Or I'd read the German newspaper or whatever my parents were suggested, which they always suggested what I liked. You know, they knew what I liked. So I learned to read at a very early age. I also learned to write at an early age.
What age were you when you learned?
2.
Fascinating.
we can see here some quote similarities with the American public education system. We can imagine the tremendous discrepancies between the special education the children of the elite get and the artificially watered down and moralized education that the general public in America is getting from the public schooling system. It is meant, we can understand obviously, to assure that these that are in control and in power would always remain in control and power, and that very seldom, if really, a person must be really a genius, his soul must be the soul of a genius in order to overcome the American education establishment, and despite the education he is getting from there, to be able to reach to the highest levels of management and science and technology in this country.
I'll give you a perfectly good example.
We have 5 more minutes here, so I would be glad if you can think of kind of a summarizing or wrapping up thought about, I mean, I've had 2 of the most wonderful hours in my life. Through my brother, who is a born psychologist, I've learned through him to kind of interview people for myself, to open up their book of life and to read through the book and to make them feel special, to feel that you have a sincere interest in them and not the superficial "how are you doing" interest. And I'm always amazed at the incredible treasure of information that you can get out of anyone, not only of the special children of the scientific elite, but even of a normal truck driver. I mean, you can talk to a truck driver and get incredible scenes and happenings of his life and so on. But I think the information that we got today here has been so fascinating. Information that one can never read in the papers, that I haven't even imagined has existed.
But you know where you got the information from, Vladimir? You didn't get it from my ear, you got it from my heart. And that's the way you interviewed. I saw all the pictures of my life come back. Like I'd look away and I'd see the pictures of my life and my father. And I'm doing this, you know, really for the world to know that there are other sides to human beings, and you can't always criticize a person because they're Russian or German or American, or criticize your flag or your country. But once in a while there is this wonderful person that emerges quietly, like my father, and sees the world in a different light, and it affects not only me, it affects my daughter's generations, maybe people that listen to this. There's no such thing as a 2-year-old that can't understand, you know. And I raised my daughter that way, and my grandson is raised that way, and they could read also at age 2.
Fascinating. So I think this whole interview is in memory of your father.
Yes.
What were his 3 names, his full 3 names?
Friedrich August Küppers, or Friedrich Wilhelm August Küppers.
In memory of Diplom engineer, Herr Diplom engineer Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm August Küppers, as would his full German title be. May he live and work in peace and fruitfully, and we all will be following his life path wherever is he.
Yes, if we meet again, then I'll say my hat's off to you, Dad. You did what you wanted to do.
Fascinating. I would like to come to your home and videotape some of the memorabilia, photographs, diplomas, anything that would bring some substance to the film, and later on we can edit it more professionally. Right now we are distributing
all the films that we've produced from the American Academy of Dissident Sciences, unedited version. I leave 30 seconds at the beginning for the title frame, and then we have the whole unedited version until the cassette stops. I think that we are about here, if I can see well, we are approaching the 2-hour limit. Do you have anything else as a final comment, as a final remark, before we conclude?
Well, I remember one of the comments that he made. He says it's not always what you see in life, it's what you don't see. That is important.
That's important.
Yes.
So let's conclude this fascinating interview with this advice, this wisdom from Herr Dr. Kuipers. In whatever dimension he might be, with his brave, valiant fellow scientist. Let's remember that it's not what we see that is the most important thing, and let's dig out deeper and try to discover for ourselves and for the whole civilization the real depth and magnitude and dimension of the secret government